This is the Horse Radio Network. This is episode 427 of Horse Tip Daily, a different horse tip, a different equine topic, a different equestrian expert every day. Horse Tip Daily brings the world of equine knowledge to you one day at a time. Today's tip is sponsored by FeedXL. Is your horse's diet balanced? Find out with FeedXL.com. Howdy everybody, Glenn the Geek back with you from Lexington, Kentucky, and you're listening to Horse Tip Daily. Well, today we have one of our most popular guests back with us. Her name is Dr. Jenny Johnson. She is from the Oak Hill Shockwave and Veterinary Chiropractic Clinic in Calabasas, California. And Dr. Johnson is committed to the maintenance of performance horses as well as family pets, and she's a regular guest over on the Jumping Radio Show. We have her on every couple of weeks, and I know if you're a regular listener, you've heard her before. And this is taken off of the Jumping Radio Show, episode number 55, and is co-hosted by Chris Stafford. And you can hear the rest of that show by visiting jumpingradio.com. And of course, this episode is brought to you by FeedXL. FeedXL does all the smart stuff that it takes to formulate and balance a horse's diet. If you haven't visited FeedXL yet, you should hop on over there right now. We're never quite sure if we're feeding our horses the right thing, or if we're giving them too much of this or too little of that. Well, FeedXL takes all the science and math that a doctor of equine nutrition learns and makes it all super easy and fun for you to use. Just plug in a few simple details about your horse and about what your horse eats. And FeedXL will spit out reports that show you exactly whether you're doing the right thing by your horse. It'll talk about vitamins and minerals and hay and grain and all those things that you really need to take a look at to find out if your horse is getting exactly what your horse needs. So to learn more about equine nutrition or how to feed your horse for the ultimate performance, you visit FeedXL.com.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Doing very good, thank you. Yeah, spring is upon us, and I tell you this every time you come on the show. It makes us feel so much better.
It certainly does. I agree. Weather is a big factor.
It is. Are you riding?
I am.
Oh,
Absolutely.
lucky you, because our listeners probably don't know that you're into jumpers. This is why we have you on the Jumping Radio Show, because isn't that your first passion?
It is. There's nothing quite like going over a big jump on a great horse. Nothing quite like that feeling.
And you do have a great horse. I've seen your horse, and he enjoys the job.
He certainly does. I'm very fortunate. He's a wonderful horse.
Well, great. Well, this week, I think we mentioned when you were on the show a couple of weeks ago, we talked about shockwave therapy, which is always fascinating. But this week, we're going to talk about another skill that you have and another thing that you practice as part of your veterinary services, and that is equine chiropractic.
Yes.
Well, one of the things I think, our listeners are going to think, well, I've had it in, myself as a rider. They may have had chiropractic treatment themselves, but sometimes people can't get their head around the fact you could do it to a horse. How big a man would it take to do it to a horse? Well, you don't need strength, do you, necessarily?
No, absolutely you don't. It's that is a very common question, and I think one of the things that I see most in my practice of chiropractic is that there's not a very clear understanding, really, of what chiropractic is and what the goal of chiropractic is, and essentially how these goals are achieved or what the route to those goals is. And so I'll talk a little bit about what chiropractic is and address that question of yours about how big a person does it take to do it. And I think chiropractic is a manual therapy. It focuses on the biomechanical dysfunction of the spine and the effect of that dysfunction on the entire nervous system throughout the body. With chiropractic, the underlying assumption is that the nervous system controls everything in the body. The spinal column, or the bony spinal column, is an intimate relationship with the nervous system because it houses the spinal cord. And another important aspect of chiropractic is that it takes as the premise that the body has an innate ability to heal. So the spine, obviously, is a very complex structure. It's a supporting aspect of any animal, horse, man, dog, and it serves as a framework of support for the attachment of many muscles. It also serves to protect the spinal cord, and it protects the internal organs because it's supporting this framework of the horse's body. And so the flexibility of the spine as a whole is critical to the horse's ability to function, to have fluent movement, to be able to jump properly, to be able to use themselves in the dressage movements. All of those aspects of the spine have to come together and work together. The bones, the ligaments, the muscles, and the nerves all have to work together. And any type of alteration in mobility affects this whole system. So really, in chiropractic, it's not about how big the person is, because when I'm adjusting an animal, what I do is I evaluate the range of motion about each vertebral joint all along the spinal column, the bony spinal column, which is made up of individual vertebrae. At each one of those joints between the vertebrae, there's a normal range of motion that each vertebrae should have. And if that range of motion becomes restricted for some reason, either due to muscle spasm, due to inflammation, an alteration of the environment around that area, then that affects the information that's flowing on the spinal nerves that exit at each one of those vertebral joints from the spinal cord. So at each one of those joints, there's a spinal nerve that comes out from the spinal cord. It splits. It goes through, one branch goes forward, one branch goes backward, and innervates the body. And in certain areas of the spine, they're also sending branches to the internal organs. So any type of alteration in the environment around where those spinal nerves come out from the spinal cord can affect the information both going out to the body as well as going back to the brain. So when I adjust a horse, stepping back a minute here, I'm evaluating the range of motion at each one of those joints. If the range of motion is normal, then I don't do anything. If the range of motion is not normal, then I do an adjustment. And an adjustment is simply a high velocity, low force thrust. And that's the key. The higher the velocity or the higher the speed, the lower the force is needed. It goes back to the law of physics, force equals mass times acceleration. So if you're fast, you don't need to have as much force. And so therefore, it doesn't take a huge person. It's actually a matter of subtleties. We're really only trying to accomplish movement of a matter of millimeters in each one of these joints. And again, I'm not trying to adjust a 1,500-pound horse. I'm adjusting one vertebral joint. And so I think that makes it a little more clear when I explain it to people that way, that it's, again, I'm not adjusting a 1,500-pound horse. I'm adjusting one vertebral joint at a time. And that's something that I can clearly move. I can feel that movement, and I can, with speed, make an adjustment in that joint.
So what would be the most common ailments that you are treating as a chiropractor, Jenny?
Well, I guess I would prefer to answer that by saying what are the clinical signs that might lead someone to think their horse could benefit from a chiropractic adjustment. And the reason I'll approach it that way is that in many cases, because of what I've described in terms of the way the nerves exit from the spinal cord and go forward and backward, I don't exactly know many times what a specific abnormality at one vertebral joint, where the ramifications of that abnormality might be seen. So, in other words, I might have an abnormality or a restriction at the third lumbar vertebrae, but the nerve that's exiting from that area may go up into the thoracic area, the cervical area, and in that case, that might affect the horse in a completely different area. So it's hard sometimes to say, well, I'm going to adjust here and that's going to fix this or change that. But some of the things that to me would indicate that the horse would benefit from a chiropractic adjustment would be a horse, some of the more obvious signs would be a horse that a rider complains is bucking unexpectedly or bucking at the lead changes. I've had some horses that will be very reluctant to be girthed up. They have very consistent signs of displeasure or discomfort when the girth is being adjusted, perhaps on one side.
Okay, that was Dr. Jenny Johnson and Chris Stafford from the Jumping Radio Show. You can visit and listen to the rest of that show at episode number 55 over at jumpingradio.com. We thank them for being part of this. We thank FeedXL for supporting us on this show. And, of course, you can find all the shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com. And we'll be back again tomorrow with another new expert and a different horse tip. Until then, stay safe, everyone.
The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements of guests or their opinions. Use your own judgment when listening to the tips provided by the experts on Horse Tip Daily.